Hello everyone, and today's story will be about how my wife cheated on me right at a work corporate party. My name is Daniel, and I'm 34 years old. I've been married to Jessica for 8 years, and for most of that time, I thought we had a good marriage. We didn't fight much. We had routines that worked. Jessica was the light of my life, someone I admired not just for her beauty but for her drive and kindness. She was the kind of person who could light up a room just by walking into it. But over the past couple of years, something changed. Maybe it was the stress of work, the grind of life, or the way relationships naturally evolve. Whatever it was, we'd lost some of the spark we once had. Our conversations became more about logistics: who was picking up groceries, when the bills were due, who was walking Max, our golden retriever. The intimacy dwindled too. Nights that used to end with cuddling or passionate kisses turned into back-to-back screen time in bed, each of us scrolling through our phones until we fell asleep. I thought it was just a phase. Every marriage goes through ups and downs, right? But looking back now, I can see the cracks I was too blind, or maybe too afraid, to address. The real trouble started when Jessica got promoted to marketing director at a new tech company. It was a huge opportunity, and I was proud of her. But the job came with long hours, endless networking events, and an entirely new social circle. At first, I didn't mind. I figured it was a temporary adjustment, that things would settle once she got into the groove. Instead, they only seemed to get worse. Jessica started staying late at the office more often. She came home tired, distracted, barely acknowledging me before heading upstairs to unwind. When I tried to ask her about her day, her answers were vague. Same old, she'd say, waving me off. She wasn't angry or distant in an obvious way, just absent. One evening, she mentioned an upcoming work party. "It's going to be a big deal," she said over dinner, her tone unusually enthusiastic. "The whole company will be there. Open bar, fancy catering, probably a few speeches from the executives. You know how these things go." "Sounds like fun," I said, smiling. "Want me to come along?" Her expression faltered for just a second, so brief I almost missed it. "Oh, it's more of an employee thing," she said quickly. "Spouses don't usually come. It's mostly about networking." "Got it," I said, trying not to feel stung. "You'll have a good time." "I will," she said, smiling again. But this time, the smile didn't reach her eyes. The night of the party, Jessica spent nearly 2 hours getting ready. She wore a sleek, black dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, her hair styled in loose waves. She looked stunning, and when she caught me staring, she gave a shy laugh. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," I said, shaking my head. "You just look incredible." She kissed me on the cheek, her lipstick leaving a faint mark. "Thanks," she said. "I won't be too late." And just like that, she was gone. I tried to distract myself that night. I put on a movie, played fetch with Max, even answered a few work emails. But my thoughts kept drifting back to Jessica. She'd been so distant lately, so hard to reach. Was it just work stress, or was there something else going on? I told myself I was overthinking it. Jessica loved me. We'd built a life together, a home. She wasn't the type to betray that. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Jessica didn't come home until well past midnight. I had fallen asleep on the couch, but the sound of the front door creaking open startled me awake. She tried to tiptoe inside, but her heels clicking softly on the floor gave her away. I sat up groggily, my heart sinking as I saw her silhouette in the dim light. "You're still up?" she asked, a hint of surprise in her voice. "Yeah," I said, rubbing my eyes. "How was the party?" "It was fine," she said quickly, brushing past me and heading toward the stairs. "Just the usual, work talk, drinks, nothing exciting." I wanted to press her for details, to ask why she hadn't called or texted to let me know she'd be this late. But something in her demeanor stopped me. She seemed almost nervous. Not frazzled like someone who'd had too much to drink, but on edge, like she was hiding something. "You're not even going to sit down?" I asked, forcing a smile to cover my unease. She paused at the foot of the stairs, her back to me. "I'm exhausted, Daniel," she said. "Can we talk tomorrow?" Before I could respond, she disappeared upstairs, leaving me alone in the dimly lit living room. The air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. Something was wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The next morning, Jessica acted as if nothing had happened. She hummed to herself while making coffee, scrolled through her phone casually, and even kissed me on the cheek before heading to the office. But her actions didn't match her words. She wasn't distant in an obvious way, but there was a guardedness in her demeanor that hadn't been there before. Her phone became an extension of her hand in the days that followed. She was always texting someone, her lips curving into faint, secretive smiles. When I asked her who she was talking to, she'd wave me off with a nonchalant, "Just work stuff." The late nights at the office didn't stop either. "We're gearing up for a big pitch," she explained one evening when she called to say she'd be late again. "I'll probably be home after 10. I wanted to believe her, but the unease in my chest was growing harder to ignore. Her explanations were always plausible, always reasonable. But they didn't feel honest. The first clue came when I was doing laundry. Jessica had left her purse on the counter, and her phone was sticking out of it. It buzzed with a notification as I walked past, lighting up the screen. My eyes darted to it automatically. The message was from someone named Trevor. I didn't recognize the name, but the preview made my stomach churn. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." I froze, my hands trembling. My rational brain told me it could be a misunderstanding. Maybe Trevor was a coworker, and the message was innocent. But my gut told me otherwise. The way Jessica had been acting lately, the way she'd brushed off my questions, the way she'd come home late from the party, it all pointed to something darker. When Jessica came home that evening, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Instead, I watched her closely, looking for any signs that might confirm or disprove my growing suspicion. She seemed cheerful, almost carefree, like she didn't have a single worry in the world. But every time her phone buzzed, she tensed, glancing at it quickly before setting it face down on the table. The breaking point came a few nights later. Jessica was in the shower, and her phone was on the nightstand. It buzzed again, and I couldn't resist. My hands shook as I picked it up and unlocked it. She'd never changed her passcode. The message was from Trevor, "Thinking about you. You looked so beautiful at the party." I scrolled up, my heart pounding. Their conversation was worse than I could have imagined. Flirty banter, inside jokes, and explicit messages that made my stomach churn. There was no room for doubt, Jessica had crossed a line. One message stood out like a dagger to my heart: "We have to be careful. He's starting to notice." I put the phone back where I found it, my chest heaving. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Jessica wasn't just distant, she was having an affair. And I was the fool who hadn't seen it coming. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I replayed every moment from the past few weeks in my head, trying to piece together the truth. How long had this been going on? Was it just physical, or was it emotional too? Did she even love me anymore? By the time the sun rose, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't stay silent any longer. I needed answers. The next morning, I couldn't sit still. Jessica was in the kitchen making coffee, humming softly to herself like nothing was wrong. Max was sprawled out on the floor, his tail wagging lazily as he followed her every movement. It was such a normal scene, but I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I knew I couldn't hold it in any longer. I'd spent the entire night thinking about what I'd read on her phone, trying to make sense of the betrayal. Every rational part of me wanted to approach the conversation calmly, to give her the benefit of the doubt. But the pain was too raw, the anger too sharp. I took a deep breath and stepped into the kitchen. "Jessica," I said, my voice tight. "We need to talk." She glanced over her shoulder, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "What's wrong?" she asked, setting down her mug. I didn't waste time beating around the bush. "Who's Trevor?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she looked genuinely startled. But then her expression shifted, her gaze dropped, her shoulders tensed, and she reached for her mug as if it were a shield. "He's just a coworker," she said quickly. "Why are you asking?" "Don't lie to me, Jessica," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I saw the messages." Her face went pale. She set the mug down with a shaking hand, her eyes darting around the room like she was searching for an escape. "You went through my phone?" she asked, her voice a mix of disbelief and indignation. "Don't you dare turn this around on me," I snapped. "You're the one sneaking around, lying to me, sending messages like, 'Last night was amazing.' So tell me the truth. What the hell is going on?" Jessica's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her silence was damning. "I'll ask again," I said, stepping closer. "Who is he?" "He's someone from work," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "We started talking at the office, and at the party, she stopped, her hands covering her face. "You what?" I demanded, my chest tightening. "Say it, Jessica. What did you do?" She lowered her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We kissed," she said, her voice breaking. "And after the party, I didn't need her to finish the sentence. My mind filled in the blanks, and the images that came to me made my stomach churn. I turned away, pacing the kitchen as I tried to keep my emotions in check. "How long?" I asked finally. "How long has this been going on?" Jessica hesitated, her tears falling freely now. "A couple of months," she admitted. "It started as just flirting, but I swear, Daniel, it didn't mean anything. I wasn't thinking." "Don't," I interrupted, spinning around to face her. "Don't tell me it didn't mean anything. You don't risk your marriage, your life, for nothing." "I know," she sobbed. "I know I messed up. I hate myself for it. I wasn't trying to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice cracking. "You destroyed me, Jessica. You destroyed us." The room fell silent except for the sound of her quiet sobs. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, feeling like my entire world had been turned upside down. How had we gotten here? How had the woman I loved, the woman I trusted, become a stranger? Finally, Jessica spoke. "I'll end it," she said, her voice trembling. "I'll block him. I'll quit my job if I have to. Just, please, Daniel. Please don't give up on us." Her words sounded desperate, but I couldn't tell if they were sincere. Did she truly regret what she'd done, or was she just afraid of losing the life we'd built together? "I don't know if I can do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." "I'll earn it back," she said quickly, stepping closer. "I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just give me a chance to fix this." I stared at her, my chest heaving. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw her betrayal in her face, to walk out the door and never look back. But another part, the part that still loved her, despite everything, was too shattered to move. "I need time," I said finally, my voice cracking. "I need space to figure out what I want." Jessica nodded, her tears falling faster. "Take all the time you need," she whispered. "I'll wait." That night, I packed a bag and went to stay with my brother. I couldn't bear to be in the same house as Jessica, not while the wounds were still so fresh. As I drove away, I couldn't help but wonder if I'd ever be able to forgive her, or if this was the end of us. Staying at my brother Kevin's place was both a relief and a burden. He didn't ask questions at first, he just handed me a beer, pointed to the couch, and said, "Take all the time you need." But after a couple of days, it became clear I couldn't avoid talking about it forever. "So," Kevin said one evening, sitting across from me with his arms crossed. "Are you going to tell me what's going on, or do I have to guess?" I stared at the label on my beer bottle, peeling at the edges. "Jessica cheated on me," I said finally, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Saying it out loud made it feel more real, more devastating. Kevin's eyes widened. "No way," he said, leaning forward. "Jessica? Are you sure?" "I read the messages," I said flatly. She admitted it. "It's been going on for months." "Jesus," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "What are you going to do?" I shook my head. "I don't know," I admitted. "I left because I needed time to think. But every time I try to figure it out, I keep getting stuck. I can't stop picturing her with him." Kevin didn't say anything for a while, just let me sit in the silence. Then he said, "Look, man, I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. But whatever you decide, make sure you're doing it for you, not for her, not for anyone else. Just for you." The next few weeks were a blur of anger, sadness, and confusion. I couldn't focus at work. My friends tried to cheer me up with beers and video games, but nothing seemed to pull me out of the fog. Every time I thought about Jessica, I felt a sharp, physical ache in my chest. I hated her for what she'd done, but I hated myself more for still loving her. Jessica, meanwhile, tried everything to reach me. She texted constantly, begging me to talk to her, telling me she was sorry, that she'd started therapy, that she was willing to do whatever it took to fix things. She called every night, leaving voicemails that I couldn't bring myself to listen to. But no matter how much I wanted to believe her, the pain was too raw. I wasn't ready. One night, after tossing and turning for hours, I decided to meet with a therapist. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe someone to tell me what to do, to give me some kind of blueprint for fixing my broken life. But what I got was something entirely different. "You're grieving," Dr. Patel said during our first session. "And grief isn't just about losing a person, it's about losing the life you thought you had. The version of your marriage you believed in." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. She was right. I wasn't just grieving Jessica's betrayal, I was grieving the trust, the connection, the stability we'd shared. Or, at least, what I thought we'd shared. What do I do with that grief? I asked, my voice cracking. Dr. Patel gave me a small, sympathetic smile. "You let yourself feel it," she said. "And then, when you're ready, you decide what you want your life to look like moving forward, whether that's with Jessica or without her." The idea of deciding my future felt impossible. On one hand, I couldn't imagine rebuilding a life with someone who had shattered my trust so completely. On the other hand, I couldn't imagine walking away from 8 years of marriage, from the woman who had been my partner, my best friend, my everything. I went back and forth constantly. Some days, I felt certain that leaving was the only option. Other days, I wondered if there was a way to forgive, to rebuild. I wasn't sure which version of myself would win out, the one who wanted to fight for our marriage, or the one who was ready to let it burn. Jessica didn't make it easy to forget her. She sent me a long letter one night, handwritten and delivered by courier. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity got the better of me. "Daniel," the letter began. "I don't know if you'll ever be able to forgive me, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. What I did was selfish and cruel, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But I want you to know that I'm committed to fixing what I broke. I've started therapy, and I'm learning a lot about myself, about the insecurities and fears that led me to make the worst mistake of my life. None of that excuses what I did, but I hope it helps you understand that it wasn't about you. It was about my own brokenness. The letter went on, pouring out her heart in a way she hadn't done in years. By the time I finished reading, I felt a lump in my throat. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw a glimmer of the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who wasn't afraid to confront her flaws head-on. But was that enough? I went back to therapy, armed with the letter and more questions than answers. How do I know if she's being sincere? I asked Dr. Patel. You don't, she said simply. Not yet, anyway. Trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It's a process. But the fact that she's taking accountability, that she's putting in the work, that's a start. The rest is up to you. The letter Jessica sent me stayed on my nightstand for days. I read it over and over, trying to pick it apart, searching for any hint of insincerity. But no matter how many times I read it, the words felt genuine. For the first time since this nightmare began, I started to wonder if maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to find a way forward. I still wasn't sure if I could forgive her, let alone trust her again. But I knew one thing for certain, I couldn't keep living in limbo. I needed to make a decision, whether to try to rebuild our marriage or walk away for good. I called Jessica one evening, my heart pounding as the phone rang. She answered on the second ring, her voice hesitant. Daniel? We need to talk, I said. Face to face. Of course, she said quickly. When? Tomorrow, I said. I'll come by the house after work. There was a long pause, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Thank you, she said softly. Thank you for giving me a chance. I didn't respond, hanging up before my emotions could betray me. I wasn't ready to thank her for anything, not yet. The next day, I walked into the house with a mix of dread and determination. Jessica was waiting for me in the living room, her face pale and her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Max wagged his tail at me, oblivious to the tension in the air. Hi, she said softly. I nodded, sitting down across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with everything we hadn't said in the weeks since I'd left. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I began, my voice steady. And I still don't know if I can forgive you. What you did, it broke something in me. In us. And I don't know if that's something we can ever truly fix. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't interrupt. She just nodded, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. But, I continued, I also know that walking away without trying would feel like giving up on everything we've built together. So if you're willing to put in the work, if you're really serious about this, then I'm willing to try. Her breath hitched, and she wiped at her tears. I am, she said quickly. I'll do whatever it takes, Daniel. Therapy, counseling, transparency, anything. I'm not making any promises, I said firmly. This isn't forgiveness. This is, a chance. And if you break my trust again, we're done. No second chances. I understand, she said, her voice trembling. Thank you. The first step was counseling. Jessica and I started seeing a therapist together, and those sessions were some of the hardest hours of my life. Sitting in that room, laying bare all of our hurts and failures, was like ripping open old wounds over and over again. Jessica admitted to feeling neglected and unappreciated in our marriage. I know that doesn't excuse what I did, she said during one session. But I let myself believe that the distance between us was too big to bridge. And instead of fighting for us, I ran. Her words stung, but I couldn't deny the truth in them. I hadn't been blameless in the breakdown of our relationship. I'd buried myself in work, taking her presence for granted. I'd stopped putting in the effort that a marriage requires, assuming that what we had was unshakable. Trust is like a bank account, our therapist said during one session. It's built up slowly over time, but it can be emptied in an instant. Jessica, you've overdraft. If you want to rebuild this marriage, you're going to have to work to refill that account, one small deposit at a time. Outside of counseling, Jessica went to therapy on her own. She opened up to me about the things she was learning about herself, the insecurities and fears that had driven her to make such a destructive choice. It doesn't excuse what I did, she said one evening after a session. But it helps me understand why I let myself go so far off track. Her openness was disarming. For the first time, I felt like I was seeing the real Jessica, the woman beneath the walls she'd built, the woman who was willing to confront her flaws head-on. But rebuilding trust wasn't just about her actions, it was about me learning to let go of the anger and resentment that had taken root in my heart. That was easier said than done. There were still nights when I lay awake, replaying the betrayal in my mind, wondering if I'd made the right choice by staying. The turning point came during one of our therapy sessions. Our therapist asked us to write letters to each other, expressing not just our pain, but also our hopes for the future. Reading Jessica's letter brought me to tears. "Daniel, I know I can never erase the pain I caused you, and I'll never stop regretting what I did. But I hope you know that I love you, that I've always loved you, even when I was too broken to show it. I want to spend the rest of my life making this up to you, not because I deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve to be loved the way you love me." Her words broke something in me, not in a painful way, but in a way that made room for healing. For the first time, I started to believe that maybe we could find a way forward. The weeks turned into months, and slowly, the wounds began to heal. Jessica continued to show her commitment through her actions, being transparent, going to therapy, prioritizing our relationship in a way she hadn't before. I worked on letting go of the anger and rebuilding the connection we'd lost. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was progress. It's been over a year since I first discovered Jessica's affair. If you'd told me back then that we'd still be together today, I'm not sure I would have believed you. The road we've traveled since that day has been long and difficult, filled with moments of doubt, anger, and heartbreak. But it's also been a journey of growth, understanding, and, surprisingly, hope. Jessica and I are not the same people we were when this all began, and neither is our marriage. I don't think we could ever go back to the way things were before the affair, but I'm not sure that's a bad thing. What we've built in its aftermath isn't perfect, but it's real. It's honest. And it's stronger in ways I never expected. One of the hardest lessons I had to learn was that forgiveness is not a single act, it's a process. When Jessica first asked for forgiveness, I thought it was something I could give her once and be done with it. But I quickly realized it doesn't work that way. Forgiveness is a choice you make every day, sometimes every hour. It's a decision to let go of the anger and resentment, not because the other person deserves it, but because holding on to it only hurts you more. There are still moments when the betrayal sneaks up on me. A passing comment, a certain song, or even just the sight of her phone buzzing can bring back a flood of painful memories. But those moments have become fewer and farther between. And when they do happen, I remind myself of the work we've done, the progress we've made, and the commitment Jessica has shown to earning back my trust. For Jessica, the journey has been about self-discovery and accountability. Her therapy sessions have helped her confront the insecurities and fears that led her down such a destructive path. She's become more open, more vulnerable, and more willing to communicate her feelings instead of burying them. "I'm learning how to be a better version of myself," she told me recently. "Not just for you, but for me too." That willingness to grow has been one of the biggest reasons I chose to stay. It's one thing to apologize and promise to change, it's another to actually do the work, day in and day out. Jessica has done that work, and while it hasn't erased the pain of what happened, it's given me hope that we can build something better. Our marriage now looks very different from the one we had before. We prioritize each other in ways we didn't before, regular date nights, meaningful conversations, even just sitting down together at the end of the day to talk about our highs and lows. It's not about grand gestures or sweeping declarations of love, it's about the small, consistent actions that remind us we're a team. Trust is still a work in progress. It's something that has to be rebuilt brick by brick, and I know it will take years to fully restore. But Jessica has been patient, never pushing me to trust her before I'm ready. She understands that it's something she has to earn, and she's willing to keep earning it for as long as it takes. If there's one piece of advice I could give to anyone going through something similar, it's this: take your time. Don't rush into forgiveness or reconciliation because you feel like you have to. Give yourself the space to grieve, to process, and to decide what you truly want. And whatever decision you make it for yourself, not out of obligation, fear, or guilt. Rebuilding a marriage after betrayal isn't for everyone. It's hard, painful work, and it requires both people to be fully committed to the process. But if you do choose to stay, know that healing is possible. It won't happen overnight, and it won't be linear, but with time and effort, you can find a way forward. Jessica and I still have a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like we're on solid ground. We've learned how to communicate, how to prioritize each other, and how to show up for our marriage in ways we didn't before. We're not perfect, and we never will be. But we're trying. And for now, that's enough. Life is messy, and relationships are complicated. But sometimes, out of the mess, you can build something beautiful.